Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Evolution Network's Draft Outlook. I am your host, Joseph Potter. Joining me today is the draft professor, Ryan Romero. And today we start out with some pretty big news when it comes to both the 2018 NFL Draft as well as the rest of the college football season, as Washington left tackle Trey Adams sustained a torn ACL in his right knee. And Ryan, that's a pretty big injury to sustain, especially when you're going in to what could possibly be a season where you prove yourself to be a top 5 NFL draft pick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could be absolutely costly for his whole career.
Yeah, and I'm looking up a lot of this information, and the big what really hurts is that it was in one of the last plays of the game. I mean, if it happened early in the game or even middle of the game, you could say, freak accident. But then when you say last play of the game, it's like, man, if I could have just gotten through that one play. And that's psychological.
Oh yeah, that's psychological all right there. So I mean, I don't think it'll bother him too much because I mean, a lot of these athletes anymore are bouncing back from injuries. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And it especially, I guess it's fortunate for him that he is only a junior. So if it doesn't quite heal on time for the combine, he will easily be able to just come back for his senior year.
I mean, that would be the best ideal scenario, of course.
Oh, of course, it's always the most ideal scenario. Now, yeah, the other impact that is definitely more concerning is, at least for the immediate, but may end up impacting this NFL draft as well, is what it will do to Jake Browning, the quarterback for Washington. Browning is a junior, and if this impacts him too negatively, he could come back, and that could also impact the 2018 season.
You know, if anything, I think I agree with you for the most part. I mean, especially with Jake Browning. If I was him, I would just come back for that extra year, especially if you get hurt this early in the season. Now, I think if he'd gotten hurt later in the season, it wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, and I think that the when it comes to Browning, I agree that later in the season that it would have been a much better situation for him. But during the season, it is probably better for Trey Adams that happened now rather than later. So depending on which prospect you're looking at, which player you're looking at, it happened at good times for good and bad times for either one of them. But it could mean that Washington ends up with both players back next year.
You know, I agree. I think ideally for Washington, that would be their best case scenario as far as a team goes. But as far as individuals go, um, it could go either way because now it gives them a chance to either have a less impactful year this next season if they do decide to stay, or it gives them a chance to be able to horribly negatively impact their stock by being able to have bad seasons, etc.
Yeah, and I think that this situation, because last week Washington did lose 13-7, and I think the situation just means that next year Washington may be in a stronger position overall, as they're almost certain to fall in this week's top 25 standings, which we will go over later. And momentarily, we should be joined by Chris Ransom. He has gotten his invite. He is ready to go, hopefully.
Hopefully.
So, hopefully. Uh, so, we're going to look at it, and for a less impactful injury that may impact Browning more than the draft or Adams, Jordan Miller, the cornerback for Washington, also broke his ankle on that play or in that same time frame. So, what do you think about Jordan Miller being out?
I mean, of course, it's going to be impactful to a point, but I don't think it's their biggest loss. As far as an individual player goes, I mean, to me, his stocks is about the same. If
You don't think that it's going to impact his stock
I mean,
in any way?
honestly, I feel like most of the time stocks get impacted at certain positions. So, like quarterback, because they touch the ball so often. And then you also have like Trey Adams and stuff like that, too, where an offensive lineman has to see X amount of snaps pretty much guaranteed every game. So, I basically kind of feel like it would impact them more than him.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And so, I mean, do you have any other points you want to make about this injury and how it will impact these guys going forward?
No, really, it just kind of comes down to, of course, it's going to impact them to a point, and I feel like right now it's just going to be the psychological aspect of, hey, if they do come back, are they going to play as well and as aggressive, or are they going to be a little hesitant? I mean, this could be a red flag as well. I mean, what if they do declare for the draft? Then it means maybe they don't have enough confidence to say, hey, I can continue to play for a full season, and they think they might get hurt again. So, as a scout, I would say that this is a red flag to a point, but it also depends on what they do in their upcoming like tryouts and different things like that as well. If they still look like they have that edge, or if they look like they lost it a little bit because of the psychological impact of an injury.
Yeah, and I agree. A lot of times when you play and you've been hurt, you'll start to play like you don't want to get hurt again rather than to
Play to win.
play to win. Yeah, not only that, but play all out because it's a lot of people don't realize when you play not to get hurt, you stand a bigger chance of getting hurt than what happens if you play all out the entire season.
I agree with you on that too. So I'm very curious to see what that impact is going to bring to these players. I mean, obviously, certain injuries are going to cause more of a psychological impact. What were their exact injuries for all three? Like, for example, I mean, if Browning hurts his shoulder or like anything on his upper body, I'd be more concerned versus like an ACL or anything like that compared to an offensive lineman where I would be more concerned about both. You know what I mean? So those are my thoughts on that. Huh. So, Joey, what else is going on in the world of sports? Hey, Joey, are you there? Sounds like Chris is having some technical difficulties too, so Joey might be trying to help him out. So let's just go ahead and continue. I recently saw a statistic about some of the top quarterbacks in college football based on quarterback ratings, and my guy Mason Rudolph was number 3 at like 90.3 or somewhere around there. So I'm really looking forward to being able to see him be a great quarterback in the NFL. And it sounds like Joey has recently just lost connection as well. So unfortunately for all of our listeners out there, y'all will be stuck with me here in a minute. So let's just go ahead and
Yeah,
make
I'm
this as
back.
smooth as possible. All
I
right.
am back. We're still trying to get Chris Ransom on the line. I lost all internet connection, so we apologize for that. Thank you, Ryan, for sticking with it. Hopefully, you were able to hold the phone for a few seconds. I just started to let you know what the exact injuries were, and exact injuries were a torn right ACL for Trey Adams and a
Oh,
broken ankle for Jordan Miller, the cornerback.
I guess I'm not as concerned about the ankle as I am the ACL because the break, it was a clean break. That means it's going to repair quicker. It's not a fracture. Whereas the ACL on an offensive lineman, I mean, God, big offensive linemen are always constantly putting that weight down on that knee, especially if he plays left tackle or inside.
Yeah, left tackle. He's 6'8", 323 pounds.
So he definitely uses his knees a lot, and especially it being that high. I mean, to me, that's a red flag. As much as I like him, I would just kind of add him on there for depth just in case your main offensive lineman gets injured at this point. So I feel like this ACL isn't necessarily a kiss of death anymore like it once was, but it definitely is impactful. I think if he maybe drops a couple of pounds and that's not trying to be, derogatory or anything like that. That's just, hey, from a health perspective, once you lose those couple of pounds, it's going to be a lot more easy on your knees on that impacts, especially if you're an offensive lineman. So it could actually help his game if he gets more, I guess you would say, durable per se, and more stamina.
And I don't even think it's durable and stamina as much as it is the knee bend. I think he will, even though the actual rehab will take less time, I believe that it will take a little more time for him because of his height, because of the amount of knee bend he'll need. But overall, I think if he goes back for a senior season, he should be all right.
I
Yeah.
don't think Adams will go back though. Going to happen though after McGlinchey. Like we know McGlinchey's the clear-cut #1 guy now, but are we going to see somebody like Orlando Brown or Okorafor take Trey Adams' place, take Connor Williams' place? Because there's talk that Connor Williams and Trey Adams may both go back now with these injuries.
And it's good to have you, Chris. I know we were having some problems getting you in here. Ryan was basically going solo for a few seconds here because I lost complete connection. But we were talking about not only the impact of the injuries to the individual players, so on Jake Browning. So what does this do to Jake Browning, Chris?
Well, Jake Browning at this point didn't have an interception or a touchdown in the loss to Arizona State. So there's definitely the possibility that him and Luke Falk both fall to round 3, maybe even day 3 now. I mean, it's up in the air right now, but we got to see what Jake Browning does without Trey Adams, because this is his window of opportunity. If he plays well without Adams, he can really assert himself as a leader and a winner and someone who can compete on every play in this draft process. And if he does terrible without Trey Adams, scouts are going to view him as a potentially a day 3 pick. I mean, this is huge for Jake Browning.
Yeah, and we're going to end this by reminding people, in this segment by reminding people, all 3 of these guys that are directly impacted by this, both the injured and Jake Browning, are all 3 juniors. For all 3 juniors, we'll be able to potentially see them again in the college football season if they decide to come back for another year. And next, we're going on to the NFL scores. We're not going to go over each game in depth. We're going to come in here. We're going to move through some of them, and we're going to break down a few of the more notable games.
And by notable, he means the Eagles-Panthers game, Chiefs-Steelers, maybe Jets-Patriots. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely the Eagles-Panthers. Yeah, that's probably the most notable, because the Thursday night game, which we'll start off with here, was probably the best game of the year. It showed that these 2 teams, probably the 2 best teams in the NFC right now. Carson Wentz, there's 3 touchdown passes, has 222 yards. Cam Newton, there, 28 for 52, 239 and a touchdown. Had some mistakes, had a couple interceptions, but he also had 11 rushes, 71 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. Kelvin Benjamin with one of his best games of the year, 90 receptions, 99 yards. Nelson Aguilar with a very strong game, a receiver for the Eagles. Both defenses. This was a defensive game. I would give the MVP to Brian Cox, the Eagles defensive tackle. He was lining up a tackle and everywhere else. When he lined up inside, you just saw the Panthers offensive line just bow in. It was a powerful defensive game. So, Ryan, what did you think of this game?
As far as the Eagles and the Panthers go, this is what I learned. I learned that I feel as though Cam Newton needs to be around better coaches, and I feel like he needs to continue to play at the caliber he plays at. Am I saying that he's the GOAT Tom Brady? No. Am I saying, did he prove me wrong this game a little bit when I saw someone who was getting pressured, hurried, and it seemed as though he stood up? Yes. So overall, I feel as though the Carolina Panthers kind of found themselves in a bit of a identity push of, what do we do now? Do we build the team around Cam Newton and get him explosive wide receivers, or do we get that O-line to protect him? Now, as far as the Eagles go, I'm very surprised that this Philadelphia team has been this good this season. Carson Wentz seems to be playing the way that he should be playing for being drafted as high as he was. So I think that overall the Eagles finally may have reached that cornerstone of, after they rebuilt themselves and kind of found their identity of being a pretty tough-nosed team for the most part, that I feel as though they'll be making an impact. So I think right now the Eagles are kind of in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, the Eagles are certainly in the driver's seat, and this was a game of decision-making between both quarterbacks. I mean, Carson Wentz had his eyes looked up. He was really focused and tuned in on making the right reads, whereas Cam Newton, he looked down whenever he made a bad throw. And this Eagles defense had more deflections versus Carolina than Denver's Super Bowl 50 defense. So Philadelphia's defensive game plan by Jim Schwartz was excellent. This team executed well, and the offense looks great too. This Eagles team only brought in 1 new coach at the wide receivers position. They brought in a wide receivers coach from Temple. The rest of their coaches are exactly the same coaches they had last year. So there's familiarity there. You can sense the familiarity, and this team looks really good right now.
Yeah, and I want to note on that Newton's head was down, and in particular, a lot of the reason for that, especially late in the game, 6 drops I counted while watching this game by Cam Newton's receivers, including 3 in a row in the third quarter while the team was driving. So, and I believe that drive ended in a field goal where it could have very easily ended in a touchdown. So
it ended in a field goal.
Yeah, so that was a big reason. You could see the frustration on Cam Newton's face started to mount. I remember one drop that ended a drive. He just ripped at his chin strap and was just yelling for not yelling at anybody in particular, just as he came off the field, just yelling because people were dropping him. I believe there was a touchdown drop that was passed by touchdown pass that was dropped by Devin Funchess in the back corner of the end zone, and that just went with the theme of the night, is that the Panthers wide receivers could not catch the ball. Kelvin Benjamin even dropped the ball that was about waist high, but he got his hands on it. He just didn't pull it in.
Yeah.
So great defense and drop passes were the theme of the night, as the Eagles superior to, at this point, my opinion, all of the NFC on Thursday night.
Yeah, with Aaron Rodgers being injured as well, which we can mention briefly, I think the Eagles pretty much have this conference on lockdown right now, because as long as they're healthy, they're going to be the team to beat, because really you've got a mystery in the NFC South, you have a mystery in the NFC North, and you still kind of have a mystery in the NFC West, because Seattle should be the team to beat, but Arizona looked really good with Adrian Peterson in his debut. The Rams are 4-2, so we don't know what's going to happen in every other division. All we know right now is that the Eagles control their own destiny in the NFC, and they had 11 deflections versus Carolina. Cam Newton, they really frustrated him, along with the 6 drop passes. And one thing I want to touch on really quick before we move on, Oren said that Cam Newton shouldn't have thrown that deep that many times that late in the fourth quarter. They still had like 4 minutes instead of 2 minutes or 1 minute, and he's playing like there was no time left on the clock. And that hurt Carolina.
Well, a lot of that would have to do potentially with the confidence in your receivers. If you throw the ball 5-10 yards and they're dropping all your 5-10 yard passes, you're not going to have confidence that they're going to catch the ball at that point. So you're going to throw it a little bit deeper, because what do you have to lose? They're going to drop the pass anyway. At least that's a mentality you have. So when your receivers as a quarterback don't play, it's like Deshaun Kaiser. Deshaun Kaiser could have easily had a 58 to 60% completion percentage on the year with fewer interceptions if the Browns didn't drop passes. And there were a couple that, one I know that Kenny Britt dropped, that he just knocked up into a receiver's arm or a defender's arms. So happens, the confidence your quarterback has in you to catch these type of passes goes down. So that could have very well been what happened to Cam Newton in that situation. He said, well, they're not going to catch, in the back of his mind, he was saying, well, they're not going to catch it anyway. So I might as well take a chance. And then if they catch it, it puts us in better position.
That's a fair point.
Real quick before we continue, I got this to say. If you look at some of the box score, Cam Newton, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, but Cam Newton, 11 carries, 71 yards. It seems as though the Carolina Panthers are relying way too much on him to run that offense and be successful. I think they need to start using Christian McCaffrey a little bit more.
They do. And Thomas pointed this out as well, and it's a huge problem. The Panthers coaches are not using McCaffrey the way the Jaguars use Fournette, and it's a huge problem with the team.
Yeah, that was something that John Gruden brought up on the – no, it wasn't John Gruden. It was one of the sounded like something John Gruden would say. But one of the Thursday Night Football guys brought up is that at one point McCaffrey had 6 catches or so, but he didn't have any carries. So they just flat said, if you're the Panthers, you would expect them with the running game not doing as much, being as effective, that they would put McCaffrey in to run the ball. And they didn't put him in to run the ball until the mid-third quarter. And he was breaking off. He'd break off a 3-yard run, then he'd break off a 5-yard run, then he'd break off a 4-yard run, 7-yard run. And Stewart wasn't doing half that. Yeah, he was getting stopped at the line. He'd make a nice run. He'd get stopped at the line again. He'd make a 2-yard run. So McCaffrey did make a difference when he came in, but he only had maybe 5 carries on the game.
I just feel as though if Carolina would send McCaffrey more on like the flat routes or run more screens for him, Carolina would have a lot more success. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. They need to – right now they're just using him like the Browns use Duke Johnson. They're using him more out of the slot than they are anything else. And they really need to start using him out of the backfield more because it's hurting them as a team, not using him to his fullest potential. Now, moving on to Sunday, we're going to start off the Sunday talk by Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that is the big news story in the NFL right now, is the loss of Aaron Rodgers and a broken clavicle, broken collarbone, whatever you want to call it. He had surgery for it yesterday. He may be out the rest of the year, and I remember when it happened, I got the alert. I was on break at work, and I automatically posted, I know, Ryan, you saw it, I said, my condolences to Lisa Donovan, because I knew what this meant. Everybody else knew what this meant.
I knew what it meant at 1:30. I knew he broke his collarbone 2 hours before the news went viral, but I was afraid of leaking the news because I thought Lisa might kill me. So I sort of, but I knew it happened before anyone else in the media. Like, it was 1:30. This went viral around 3:30, but I knew it was a broken collarbone at 1:30, but I didn't want to say anything in fear of Lisa possibly hurting me.
Yeah, and we're going to go ahead and move that Packers-Vikings game up to the top of the Sunday recaps because the Packers were 4-1 coming into this game. They ended up losing 23-10. They're now 4-2, 1-2 on the road. And what, Chris, does this do to their season? I mean, do they pick up another win this season?
Yes, they pick up 3, but they are going to go 7-9 and end the year with a losing record. I have the Lions actually going 6-0 in this division, but they finished second at 9-7 and missed the playoffs. And I have the Vikings, Ryan's dad's team, winning this division now at 10-6, but losing in the wild card game to a team like Carolina. So right now, I'm looking at the Vikings as the team to beat, but I think they suffer another wild card loss, like the one they did in Seattle against Seattle a few years ago, at the hands of a team like Carolina, if the season were to end today.
Yeah, right now, Ryan, what do you think the psychological aspects of Aaron Rodgers going down does to the Packers, not only as a team, but as an organization?
I would say right now the psychological impact is, are they going to be able to utilize their new quarterback well enough? And to me, the answer is no, because I saw someone that was a little hesitant and a little scared on making passes shorter than 5, 6, 7 yards, or I should say longer, because even the announcers were like, I don't think I've ever seen so many 7-yard passes.
And Brett Hundley was a guy who had questions with his deep ball accuracy coming out of UCLA, but the rest of his game was there. He relied heavily on that short and medium passing game. We both liked this guy coming out of UCLA. We thought he was the steal of that 2015 draft. Now is his chance to show that he can be that steal. He plays a Saints defense that has struggled in pass defense next week at Lambeau Field, and he's got to come up and make a statement game, because if he doesn't, we're going to get a pretty clear indicator that he's not the quarterback of the future. But if he steps up and gets the Packers to the playoffs, the Packers can trade him for a high draft pick. So
Yeah, and I think that right now, this is Hundley's shot. Hundley, if he falters at this point, you're going to start hearing the rumblings for another quarterback to be brought in. We're not going to mention any names to that effect, but you're going to hear the rumblings for another quarterback to come in, and you can rest assured the Packers will draft another quarterback in the next year. Hundley cannot prove that he is a player that is capable of carrying that team. Now, moving on, we're going to start back with the earliest of the early games. We're going, the Browns lost to the Texans 33-17. I don't think anybody's going to pick the Browns to win until they win a game, or at least show that they have a quarterback that wins. The Browns defense with another strong showing, only giving up 26 points, but it took 3 players holding the running backs to a total of 60-something yards, while giving up 3 touchdown passes to Deshaun Watson, who had another very good outing, going 17 of 29, 225 yards and 3 touchdowns, as the Browns moved to 0-6, while the Texans moved to 3-3 and 2-2 at home. Dolphins, this was an upset week, people. I'm not going to discount that enough, because you saw many, many upsets and you'll see it as we go down through. Not the least, the Dolphins upset the Falcons 20-17. The Dolphins moved to 3-2, 2-1 away, while the Falcons moved to 3-2, 1-2 at home. Matt Ryan, 24 of 35, 248 yards and a touchdown. AJ ran wild.
He did run wild, like you said, and the Dolphins trailed this game 10-0, 14-0 at halftime, and I really give their team a lot of credit for rallying back. I think the difference maker was Rashad Jones, though. He had the game-winning interception for Miami, and I decided to give him the credit because Ajay did run wild, but he didn't have a rushing touchdown. I'm like a perfectionist when it comes to this type of stuff, when it comes to trying to pick the best players in each game. And that's one thing Joey can't stand about me.
Yeah, I've seen you on and literally put NFL prospects in order because they don't have the right amount of yards. They don't have the right amount of touchdowns. They don't have the right amount of 100-yard games. They don't have the right amount of 300-yard games. Chris is a perfectionist when it comes to stats and what stats you get and how those stats actually impact everything about your game and who you are. Chris is a perfectionist about that, and that's one of the good things about having him around is that if you need a stat, Chris is on top of it. So, I mean, that's something that we all learn early. If you need a stat, just say, Chris, what's the stat? Chris has websites written down. He's probably got a full notebook sheet full of them.
Yeah, there's PDFs of every game on NFL.com, and unlike some weeks where I'll just half-ass a game, I went through all of the Sunday games, I read through all the PDFs, and before getting the game recaps up. So, like the penalties, the false starts, any of that, I can get you that and mention it at certain points, but briefly, like 30 seconds to a minute. That's what we're trying to perfect here at the Evolution Network.
Point made. Moving on, we're going to go to the Saints-Lions. The Saints beating the Lions in a high-scoring shootout. You can't say that everybody's going to put down Matt Stafford blew the game, had a couple turnovers, this, that, and the other. This was a 52-38 game. The Saints beat the Lions. It was a high-scoring game. It was an offensive extravaganza, 90 combined points run through. Anybody for winning, and I don't blame anybody for losing. This was the team that scored the most points was going to win. And if you try to outscore the Saints,
you're going to be in a track meet. And it's like you said, whoever scores the most points is going to win this game, period. All I will add is that if Kenny Vaccaro doesn't recover that fumble for a touchdown, which made it 7-0 early in the game, maybe this game goes to overtime and the Lions win. That's all I'm going to add because you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all it was. Now, here's a game that Chris wanted us to go over in more detail, so we are. And just for that, I'm going to go to Ryan first. The Patriots beat the Jets 24-17. That was one thing I am glad we're not talking about an upset with. But Ryan, Josh McCown, once again finding the fountain of youth, 31 for 47, 354 yards, 2 touchdowns. Earlier in the week, Hugh Jackson said, I love this guy so much as a football mind. I offered him a job as a coach.
I guess
to stay with this organization. So what does this say about Josh McCown, not only as being offered a job as a coach to help coach the young quarterbacks in the Browns, but also as a player that at age 37, he's still putting up 354 yards on the freaking Patriots.
Dan Fouts was basically saying that this guy's ceiling is maybe a future head coach. As far as coaching goes, his mind is at such a high capacity that he could retire right now and be a quarterback's coach tomorrow, then work his way up to either quarterback, offensive coordinator, or assistant head coach, and then eventually get promoted to head coach at some point. That's his ceiling as far as coaching goes. So,
I gotta agree with you for the most part about the coaching. As far as what he's doing right now with the Jets is pretty good. It's kind of saddening that we didn't see flashes like this in his earlier career. But 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, right now he's just being a game manager, and I mean, it's nothing that we're gonna make too big of a fuss on. I mean, it's definitely he's possibly putting the Jets in line for having a Cinderella season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as far as the Patriots and the Jets goes, the Patriots did not have Stephon Gilmore or Eric Rowe at cornerback. That made McCown's job a lot easier. And Malcolm Butler, he did struggle early. He got beat on that play by Roby Anderson, and the Jets took a 14-0 lead. But a lot of the Jets' leading was due to defense. They put the Patriots to a 3-and-out on their first drive. Gillislee fumbled the ball. New York recovered the fumble. Buster Screen got the fumble recovery. Brady had the interception. So it was just setback after setback after setback until Tom Brady finally opened things up for Gronkowski and Amendola, and those completions set up the Dion Lewis touchdown. Once the Patriots got on the scoreboard, they never looked back. Malcolm Butler had an interception. He also forced a fumble that prevented a Jets touchdown, which many believe was a clear touchdown. Even I, a Patriots fan, feel like the Jets got screwed out of overtime because that play where Austin Seferi-Jenkins crossed the pylon, that was a touchdown, but the refs called it a fumble. He had his hand over the pylon. That's a touchdown. I hate to say it, but the officials helped the Patriots win this game, and the Jets kind of got screwed out of a chance to pull an overtime upset.
Yeah, and so the Patriots go on to win the game overall.
I think the worst decision by
good game with a great outing by Josh McCown.
3 timeouts in the first drive in the third quarter. You can't win when you burn 2 of your 3 timeouts on the first drive in the third quarter, especially against the Patriots.
Yeah, and now moving on to another rookie, C.J. Beathard, a guy that none of us really saw much in coming out due to a poor combine, poor pro days.
And this was supposed to be the Michigan State Bowl, Hoyer versus Cousins, but Hoyer gets benched for Bethard.
Yeah, it was just a guy that fell in the draft because he just was terrible during the pre-draft process. Comes in 19 for 36, 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 2 sacks, and just played pretty well overall. Nothing to write home about as a barn burner type game, but played pretty well overall. And as the Washington Redskins beat the San Francisco 49ers 26-24. So, Chris, is Bethard the quarterback of the future for San Francisco?
I don't think he is the quarterback of the future. I think they're going to draft a QB like Darnold or Rosen if they get the number 1 pick, because their scouting department has been to 4 of Sam Darnold's games, they've been to 2 of Rosen's games, and they went to 1 of Josh Allen's games. They have been screening these quarterbacks like the NSA. And when I say screening like the NSA, they are monitoring these quarterbacks on a weekly basis so they can figure out which of those 3, Allen, Rosen, or Darnold, fits their system the best. And they're leaning towards Darnold right now, but Darnold might not go pro, so they might end up taking Rosen. But this is something we need to keep an eye on, because those are the 3 QBs the 49ers have been sending their scouts to watch on a weekly basis.
Yes, it is. And Kirk Cousins goes 25 for 37, 330 yards, 2 touchdowns as the Washington Redskins once again beat the winless 49ers 26-24.
And then Cousins missed out to Bethard and said, "Hey, CJ, you might be my backup one day." That's a joke in case Cousins signs with the Niners.
And moving on, and another upset. The Bears go to 2-4, beat the Ravens. Joe Flacco goes 24 for 41, 180 yards, 2 interceptions. So, Ryan, Mitchell Trubisky with another game of meh. I didn't turn the ball over at least. Game where he didn't do much of anything except not throw an interception or fumble the ball. So, what do you think so far of Trubisky's first 2 starts?
Honestly, I mean, I'm impressed, but not impressed. I mean, I'm impressed in the sense of the rookie hasn't committed a turnover, so that's good, right? The next thing is, honestly, though, who's he going to throw to? I mean, who on the Bears is honestly good enough to be able to consider handling that load or do anything else as far as that?
They got their 2 best receivers, Cameron Meredith and Kevin White. Their 2015 first-round pick are both on season-ending injured reserve, and that's why he doesn't have any weapons at the moment. Those guys can be solid weapons, but the problem is they can't stay healthy. So the Bears are going to have to look at a wide receiver in the 2nd round, because it's a great receiver draft. They can get a pass rusher in round 1. They can get a receiver in round 2, but they've got to get a receiver in the first 2 rounds, like you pointed out, Ryan. This team has a lot of holes. And I'm surprised you didn't mention how disappointing Joe Flacco was, but I'm going to give credit not to Trubisky, but to Adrian Amos. He had a pick 6, which made it 24-14 in the 4th quarter. And I'm going to give Adrian Amos all of the credit here. And Mitchell Trubisky, I'm just going to treat him like someone that deserves the silent treatment, because he played well, but he didn't impress me. So,
yeah, Trubisky. And here's another stat. Trubisky did commit a turnover. He did lose 2 fumbles.
Yes.
Well, he lost 1 fumble. He fumbled the ball twice, lost 1 of them. So, yes, the reason that the Bears won this game was the Adrian Amos interception. The other thing that you want to look at is the reason that Trubisky doesn't really have to do much of anything or throw the ball is that, once again,
Chicago
Jordan Howard
running game. They gave the running game 50 carries in this game. And when you give the Bears running game 50 carries, they might not get a rushing touchdown, but they will at least, both running backs will at least combine for 100 total yards. And as far as Adrian Amos goes, he had 8 solo tackles, 2 deflections, the interception that was a pick six. So Amos was the biggest reason the Bears won when you look at all that, because he led the team in tackles as well.
And Jordan Howard, a guy who we were all high on coming out of Indiana 2 years ago, once again impressed with another game of 36 carries, 167 yards. Trubisky doesn't have to do much. He doesn't have to throw the ball much. He just has to not turn it over, because right now the Bears are running Howard into the ground and are coming off with great results, as the Ravens' dysfunctional offense continues to be dysfunctional, and the Bears' running attack continues to show that it has great potency and great hope for the future, as the Bears win 27-24 over the hapless Ravens offense. Moving on, the Cardinals and Adrian Peterson's debut with 26 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns, with a win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was a great game, high scoring. Peterson still shows he's got it, and this could change as we mentioned earlier, the outlook of that division. The Rams, Ryan, this is your team. They won 27-17 over the Jaguars. I watched some of this game. This was not a game that was lost by the Jaguars offense or the Jaguars defense. This was a game lost by the Jaguars special teams. The Rams blocked right before the end of the half, block a punt for a touchdown to make it 23-14. It was a 17-14 game before that, plus a holding call which brought back a touchdown run at the beginning of the game. It was nothing more than a comedy of errors for the special teams. 2 missed field goals in a row by the Jaguars kicker. So the Jaguars were leaving points on the board on special teams and giving them up.
Yes, that's a good point. The Jaguars, they had it was 7-7, but they had a 16-yard punt. A 16-yard punt. You can't have a 16-yard punt, because that'll give the Rams an easy field goal, especially when you're at your own 35-yard line and you have a 16-yard punt. That's not going to cut it. And the Rams also blocked a punt, which they returned for a touchdown. So the Rams special teams and Jared Goff were the reasons they prevailed. So Goff wasn't.
Ryan, what do you have to say about Jared Goff? Because Goff went a pretty pedestrian game, 11 for 21, 124 yards, 1 touchdown, 5.9 yards average. In a lot of ways, he was outplayed by Blake Bortles.
He played turnover-free football on the same defense that intercepted Ben Roethlisberger 5 times last week. That's my big takeaway here.
Yeah. So Ryan, what do you have to say about your man? Pretty much, just
really though. The Jacksonville Jaguars have just come out of nowhere. So it's just kind of hard to say, like, hey, is this team just in one of those years where everything just seems to be gelling, or are they legit? But like Chris said, though, look at Big Ben Roethlisberger. Been playing in this league for a while. He watches a lot of game film. Sure, he's probably pretty familiar with almost all of Jacksonville's roster. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I could say that he's probably pretty familiar with it. And so with that being said about Goff, Ryan, what do you think about the 2 running backs, Gurley and Fournette, for both teams combined? They had 44 carries, 146 yards, over 5.5 yards a carry with a touchdown. What do you think about these 2 guys? Are these guys the future of the running back position in the NFL?
I don't know about Gurley being the future of the running back in the NFL. That's just a little hard to say at this point in time because of everything that went on with his first, 2 seasons, he was really good. And last year it was like, where did he go and why was he even talked about? This year he seems to be making a little bit more of a comeback and seems a bit more focused. As far as Fournette goes, I'm no longer worried about him when he said, "Hey, I never dreamed about playing in the NFL," because it wasn't a passive comment. It was more of I think he was very overwhelmed with happiness and shock that he's playing in the NFL. Because Fournette right now looks like what Adrian Peterson did when he came into the league. So of those two, I would say Fournette probably has the most up potential and the biggest ceiling for success right now compared to Gurley.
Yeah, and when it comes to Gurley, he has 123 attempts on the year for 521 yards, 4.2 yards average, 4 touchdowns. His long is a 29-yard run. So, I mean, Gurley, remember, Gurley's still 23 years old. Fournette, I think it's 22 at this point. These guys, so believe it or not, whether we're going to give Ryan the benefit of the doubt because Ryan is a skeptic for the most part. He's skeptical about everybody until they prove him wrong, which is not a bad thing.
I was even skeptical of my dad making tamales until he proved me wrong. So it's not just football.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's meaning it definitely makes myself and Chris work hard to find what is needed to, because we know if we can convince Ryan, then whoever we're talking about or whatever we're talking about is definitely somebody that we're going to have on our radar. Moving on to the Steelers and Chiefs. Ben Roethlisberger, 17 for 252 yards and a touchdown. Leads the Steelers 19-13 over the Chiefs. And Chris, you mentioned this team. So what do you think of this game? As
Steelers-Chiefs game in Kansas City, this was a game where Le'Veon Bell just straight up dominated in this week. And you look at this game here, Alex Smith muffs a snap. Pittsburgh goes up 2-0. The craziest way this game started is Kansas City recovered the ball on a safety thanks to Jehu Chesson. So they drove downfield. They got a field goal. They led 3-2 after one quarter. But Le'Veon Bell put the Steelers ahead. And then Ben Roethlisberger, he threw some completions to Juju Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown. Boswell put the team up 12-3 at halftime, and both of these defenses really looked extremely sharp in the third quarter. The passer penalty by Mike they went for it on fourth down to start the fourth quarter. They didn't convert. Kansas City made a stop. Kansas City got the ball back. Smith threw a passing touchdown to make it 12-10, and then Ben Roethlisberger responded with a touchdown of his own to make it 19-10. Chiefs got a field goal, but Pittsburgh won 19-13. Bell had 32 carries, 179 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. Bell was the biggest reason Pittsburgh won. Kareem Hunt still became the first running back in NFL history to have 6 consecutive games of 100 total yards, mainly because he had 21 rushing yards and 79 receiving yards. 79 and 21 adds up to 100, kids. So, yeah, Kareem Hunt's 100-yard streak is still technically alive, even though it technically isn't because he technically didn't rush for 100 yards, but he's still at 100 total yards. So his streak technically still alive.
yeah, and let's not discount that Antonio Brown had 8 receptions, 155 yards, and a touchdown as the Steelers once again moved to 4-2, while the Chiefs fall to 5-1, winning 19-13. In the next game, Phillip Rivers went 25 for 36, 268 yards as the Chargers beat the Raiders 17-16. The Giants with a huge upset over Ryan's Broncos, 23-10. Trevor Siemian, 29 of 50, 376 yards and a touchdown for Denver.
This game got so lopsided that Al Michaels had to chime in on Harvey Weinstein, saying that the Giants were worse than Harvey Weinstein. So, yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
this that game was just absolutely terrible, and it was hard for me to watch. First off, as far as what the Broncos need to do, I mean, I was pretty sold on Trevor for a while. I mean, he still has flashes, but in all credit, though, the Giants have always had a pretty good defense, and they've always had a good defensive scheme. But man, the Broncos need to think about either drafting a quarterback or really sitting down and talking to Paxton Lynch and saying, hey, what can we do to make you better? Who can we draft to help click? Because right now, the Broncos are losing games because they can't sit there and move the ball at all. I mean, they can sit there and move the ball on occasion, but God, we gotta move on from this smash mouth run the game football and move on to something a little bit more aggressive and passing, like a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers type scenario where you just let the quarterback air it out versus, hey, let's try and protect him and give him these short dinky passes, because I think that's what Peyton Manning did for the Broncos is he spread the field. But back to this game, the Giants were missing all of their starting wideouts and you're the no-fly zone. What the heck kind of performance was that?
Yeah, because I'm surprised that the Giants at this point. I didn't think they were going to win 2 games all year.
I had them going 2-14, tied with the 49ers and Bears for the number 1 pick in the draft. But now I've moved the 49ers down to 1-15. I have the Browns at 2-14 with Mariota healthy. I moved the Bears up to 3-13 thanks to the win over the Ravens, and I have the Giants now at 3-13 as well. So I still have the Giants picking in the top 5, but they move up from number 3 to number 4.
Yeah, and that is. And as far as the standings go, the Browns are so hard to figure out right now because if again they could have the potential to go 0-16. If they start to show Kaiser, it really depends on his development. So with the Browns in the draft order, whether they finish behind the Giants and them, it's really gonna be difficult to tell until we figure out what exactly is going through Hugh Jackson's head in the quarterback situation.
I give them Baker Mayfield with the Texans pick because I feel like if he's there at 7, they can't pass on him with the Texans pick. But I'm not going to give them Darnold or Rosen unless they fire Hugh Jackson because they have to take Saquon if he's there at 2. They just have to. If Hugh Jackson keeps his job, they have to take Barkley and keep building that team around Kaiser. And I still think the possibility of them trading that pick from Houston is on the table.
Yeah, and I think right now, as far as Deshaun Kaiser goes, Kaiser's still got a great future, but people are going to have to – these guys are going to have to figure out what they want to do with them. Moving on to the Monday night game last night, I know Chris and myself were watching it. I watched a good portion of it. Chris watched – I don't know how much you watched of it, but the Titans, Marcus Mariota was not mobile. He was not doing much other than sitting in the pocket and running the offense. Still finishes with 306 yards and a touchdown. And I think this was his best game as a pocket passer since he came into the NFL because he couldn't run. Sad that it takes an injury to where you can't do something to see that you can do something else, but sometimes fate does what it wants. Derrick Henry with a huge game, 19 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown as the Titans beat the Colts 36-22. And Ryan, I got to ask, what did you think of the games, both Mariota and Henry for Tennessee?
You know, from some of the highlights I'd seen, Mariota, like you said, he stayed in the pocket, so it makes you really wonder how serious that injury is, because for anyone who knows football, they know Mariota likes to run around. So I'm very curious to see how this impacts his game, if it'll make him better or worse. For example, Russell Wilson used to be a real mobile quarterback, and now all of a sudden he's more of a pocket passer, improved his game, still great. So in my case right now, the Tennessee Titans might want to consider scouting the quarterback to possibly take his place for.
I brought it up in Lombardi's draft talk last week. I said if Lamar falls to the Titans, do you take him over Mariota and bring in that competition the way the Chiefs brought in Mahomes to challenge Smith? I brought it up in a jokingly question, and I got 3 ha-ha emojis. So I don't think it happens, and I think they do place that 5th-year tender. But I knew it wasn't going to happen, and I was trolling those people at Lombardi's Draft Talk. You'd have to be insane to think that they would take Lamar Jackson with Mariota's injuries at that point. But I wanted to troll them and see what kind of reaction I'd get.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll troll them right now, and it's not even trolling. To me, it's just the truth. Is right now, if I'm the Titans, Mariota hasn't lived up to the expectations of what the Titans should become the past 2-3 years. I feel like he gets hurt a lot. I feel like I'm always watching him get on the ground. So if you guys do draft Lamar Jackson, I feel like the franchise could only go up from there because you have somebody that's a little bit more mobile and has a little bit more of a competitive nature, I guess, like that, hey, let's go kill it and beat it kind of thing.
What did you think about Henry in this situation with probably his best game as a professional?
I mean, Henry, to me, he was probably one of the best running backs coming out of college for the past 5 years since Adrian Peterson. I mean, this guy is a power runner. He can take the ball. He can run the ball. And, of course, most importantly, he can break tackles and run over defenders. I haven't seen a guy play football like this since a combination of LaDainian Tomlinson and the bus. I think his performance, because how many yards per game is he averaging right now? Isn't it hovering between like 4 point something and like 5.2? I don't know. We'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
Chris, statistician. What is Henry averaging right now?
Henry's averaging 3.1 carries a game.
Oh, wow.
I'll double check. That's what he was averaging heading into last night's game. I will see if that number is skyrocketed. I mean, he averaged over 100 yards, and I did get a Garrett Henry photo. Okay, he went up from averaging 4.7 carries a game to 5.1 carries, and he averaged about 2.2 yards a game until this week, where he averaged 6.9 yards per carry, which is why his yards have gone up. He'll probably go back down to like 4 or 3 yards per carry at the end of the season, but he averaged 7 yards per run against the Colts last night, and their run defense is really suspect.
See, and that could have been it as well, is also look at the Colts defense. I mean, let's face it, they've never really been known for having a great defense, even since the early thousands when Peyton Manning was still there. I mean, they've always just kind of been bad on that side of the ball. So, I mean, really, I think Henry was a good football player in the sense of he did take advantage of a bad defensive line. But seriously, I mean, the combination between him and Murray, I mean, they're still basically the most untouchable running backs in the league. It just, to me, the question mark goes back to Marcus Mariota. Are the Titans going to be able to rely enough on him to be able to make a run? I mean, I don't think I don't think he's the kind of guy that can win you a championship kind of thing.
And good stuff, guys. Good stuff. And now we're going to move on to a quick recap of the college football season. Football week that was, as Syracuse wins in an upset 27-24 over Clemson. A game I watched on ESPN was Cal absolutely destroying Washington State, as Luke Falk has probably one of the worst games of his college career, going 28 for 43, 286 yards, and 5 interceptions, as the young Cal defensive line just put pressure and destroyed any hope that
because I had a day 2 grade on Cole Madison, the right tackle for Washington State, but I know most NFL scouts had a 7th round grade on him. And with this game where Falk took 9 sacks, he's moving into the day 3 territory for sure. Same could be said with left guard Cody O'Connell.
Yeah, and I had to say a lot of it, I think, was the Cal defensive line. These guys are all freshmen and sophomores. They are hungry. They're young. They're athletic. They're unrefined. You don't know what's going to come from them. And they were just getting after it in this game. And we are going to have to watch over the next 2 to 3 years with these guys, because they're going to have prospects coming out the wazoo when it comes to that front four. And California, they're a team that's definitely on the rise in the next couple years, simply because of that defense. Alabama, number 1 Alabama, beat Arkansas 41-19. Ohio State beat Nebraska 56-14. Number 9, Ohio State beat Nebraska 56-14. Georgia, number 4, beat Missouri 53. Washington, in a game we went over at the top of the show, lost to Arizona State. Yet they're going to drop from number 5 as they lost 13-7. The ECU Longhorns beat Kansas State 26-6. Washington beat Purdue 17-9. Auburn lost to LSU 27-23. Number 11 Miami beat Georgia Tech by a point, 25-24, and probably the closest game of the week. Oklahoma beat Texas 29-24 as Baker Mayfield 17 for 27 with 2 touchdowns, and at this point he threw his first interception during week 7 of the college football season. Chris, what do you have to say about him not throwing a touchdown until week 7 of the college football season?
Well, right now there's a lot of injuries right now in college football. There's a lot of teams that lost this week, so you're going to see Georgia move up to number 3. Penn State's now at number 2. TCU is at number 4. So a lot of the unbeatens in college football lost this past weekend, and I mean, there were 13 unbeaten teams heading into last week, and that number has altered. Right now, you still have South Florida and Central Florida without a loss. Navy finally lost their first game, so they're no longer unbeaten. Clemson is in second place in the Atlantic Division in the ACC. North Carolina State's in first, so Miami, Florida would be the third unbeaten outside of South Florida and Central Florida. TCU is the only unbeaten in the Big 12, so that's 4 unbeatens. And then you look at Penn State is the only unbeaten in the Big 10 along with Wisconsin, so that's 5 or 6 unbeatens. I'm still scrolling through this, and yeah, because you've got the 3 teams from Florida, and then you've got the 2 Big 10 teams in terms of other unbeatens. So there's no Georgia and Alabama are really the only unbeatens in the SEC, so that's like 7 or 8 unbeaten teams remaining. I'm pretty certain it's 8 or 7, but I will double check one more time. The 2 SEC teams and the 2 Big 10 teams, that's 4. And then you've got TCU, that's 5. Miami, Florida is 6. And then, so there's 8 unbeatens left in the FBS this year.
Yeah, and that's some good information, Chris. And Ryan, what do you think of it being week 7 before Baker Mayfield throws his first interception? We know you're a skeptic of his.
Whoa. I never said he wouldn't be bad. I always said he was the safest pick. And to me, this proved that. So, I mean, if I'm an NFL team and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, hey, I need a quarterback that's going to be consistent. I need a quarterback that's going to be accurate and make good decisions that I can build a franchise around. And one guy that can actually possibly be able to show enough passion and intensity, which he showed by planting a certain flag on a certain team's territory.
Well, Baker Mayfield is the best intangibles in the draft, which is what I've been saying.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying, though. As an NFL team, though, it's not necessarily about that, about the intangibles. Of course he has that. It's how is he going to be able to make an impact on the veterans of a team to be able to continue to have them show up as well. And I think that that's what he has, because if he gets drafted, instead of having some guy that says, hey, I'm the best, I can do this, this, and this, you have a guy that says that too, but then he also says, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we go ahead and screw with the other team and put a flag over there? You know what I mean? And then, of course, the veterans are going to get a chuckle out of doing stupid stuff like that. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to happen on the NFL field. Probably some stupid, player jokes off the field. But that's what I'm saying, though, is that he has that intangible as far as character and a motivation factor to be able to lift veterans up. So to me, I would say if I'm like a team like, maybe even the Packers in a situation like this, maybe even New Orleans, the Chargers, you can even go as far as the Giants. These guys that have these veteran quarterbacks that are going to want someone that's energetic that can come in and help charge up the veterans too, and then take over, that would be my pick.
Ryan, now here's a question for you. 2013, Mayfield had 9 interceptions. 2015, 7 interceptions. 2016, 8 interceptions. Does Baker Mayfield in the remaining 4 weeks of the season get to the 10 interception mark?
So there's 4 weeks left, and he just threw his first, right?
Well, there's 6 weeks left, Joey, because there's 12 regular.
The playoffs and bowl games. Yeah, I get that stuff, Chris. I'm talking about regular season.
There's 6 more regular season games, Joey. Every team plays 12 regular season games. That's what I'm pointing at. You said there were 4 games left.
Really?
Yeah.
I was always thinking it was 10 plus a conference championship game.
Yeah.
So I guess your question is he going to be able to throw how many more interceptions by the end of the season?
9.
Oh, God, there's 6 games. Who are the teams that he's playing?
Okay, he gets at Kansas State next Saturday. That should be an easy win. Texas Tech. He gets Oklahoma State and TCU. And those are going to be the games that test him the most, in my opinion, because TCU's got Texada, that corner that limited Sutton does 1 reception for 0 yards. And they've got Oklahoma State, who is Mason Rudolph, and that's at Oklahoma State. So that's a road game. So they could lose both of those games, and Baker could throw picks in those 2 games. But Kansas and West Virginia should be easy wins. I don't see Baker Mayfield throwing any more than 5 or 6 interceptions, and I think it's due to the strength of schedule being weaker than usual.
I'm going to say that he goes ahead and he finishes with 7 interceptions.
All right. We'll come if I'm not too lazy, we'll come back to this recording and put it back on the numbers and see what happens.
I'll pay attention.
Okay. At least we have somebody who can pay attention around here.
I can pay attention too. I'm looking up the schedules, getting all the data for you guys.
Yes,
look,
you are.
Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
A squirrel.
Yeah, no, that's how my thought process works. Number 13, USC beat Utah 28-27. Sam Darnold went 27 for 50 with 3 touchdowns. And once again, everybody says that don't worry, Sam Darnold's accuracy and his other stuff mean absolutely nothing, even though this was his first no interception game since
and he had 2
season
fumbles early in the game, so he now leads the FBS in most fumbles lost with 9, and he has 9 interceptions.
Okay,
so yeah, if his draft stock's literally a time bomb. He's remained the number 1 pick in my mock this week, but his draft stock is literally a time bomb at this point. And when I say time bomb, I mean, well, if he has 1 more fumble lost or 1 more interception the rest of the season, I'm going to strongly consider moving him behind somebody like Josh Rosen, behind Baker Mayfield. That's what I mean when I say his draft stock is a time bomb.
Yeah, if USC loses, I think his draft stock just takes a mighty fall. Number 14, Oklahoma State beat Baylor 59-16. Mason Rudolph finished 19 of 31, 459 yards and 3 touchdowns. James Washington, who I feel is the reason for Rudolph's huge stats at this point, finished with 6 receptions, 235 yards, and a touchdown. Oklahoma State beats Baylor, and James Washington draft stock just keeps going up. Number 17, Michigan beat Indiana 27-20. South Florida, number 18, beat Cincinnati 33-3. Behind Quentin Flowers, 16 of 29, 184 yards, and 15 rushes for 80 yards from 1 touchdown. Boise State beat San Diego State, number 19, So San Diego State loses again in the Mountain West Conference, and this pretty much puts a damper on any draft prospects they had at this point. We're going to have to revisit that later. Then you have number 20, NC State beating Pittsburgh 35-17. Number 21, Michigan State beating Minnesota 30-27, with Demery Croft going 11 of 20, 163 yards and 3 touchdowns for Minnesota, and L.J. Scott leading Michigan State to the victory with 25 carries, 194 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then you have UCF, University of Central Florida, staying undefeated, winning against East Carolina 63-0. You have Stanford 49-7 over Oregon. Bryce Love, who we were talking about on Sunday, finished with 17 carries, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. Texas Tech, number 24, lost to West Virginia, as the West Virginia was led by Will Grier, 32 of 41, 352 yards, 5 touchdowns on the day. Then we have Navy, who was newly into the top 25. Memphis is Anthony Miller once again with a huge game, 10 receptions, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Riley Ferguson was 24 of 40, 279 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Canceled games were South Florida and UMass. I'm not sure why it was canceled, to be honest with you. I don't think it was in Florida, so I can't really say. We didn't have any inclement weather here. And postponed games that were for Thursday, August 12th, with Georgia Tech and number 11, Miami. So we're looking at this. So, guys, what did you see in this week, and what do we look forward to in the future?
Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I know that on Friday's podcast, we are going to talk about the Game 7s in the AL and NLCS if those happen. I also think on Friday we're talking about the Patriots-Falcons, because that game's next week in New England. And I really want to see it. I can't stress this enough. I want to see James White and Gostkowski. White is 28. Gostkowski's number 3. I want them both to stand next to the Falcons at the coin toss to remind them of the 28-3 lead they had in the Super Bowl.
Ryan, what did you take away from this week in football?
I took away that when it comes down to the quarterback class for this week for the NCAA, it's going to come down to consistency, accuracy, and also decision making. And on that note, 2 names actually popped up on my radar going through different sports feeds and groups and things like that. And that was West Virginia's Will Grier having a 91.2 grade. And then you also had Eric Dungy with the 90.5 grade, according to Pro Football Focus college data. And all I'm saying, though, is if you just go based on numbers, that's not bad.
No, it isn't. And we're
Do we
going to
finally
go
start to consider them like in the list? And maybe
I think
cracking
Will
the top
Grier is not an NFL caliber quarterback. I don't trust the offense he plays in. And you look at a lot of the teams he's faced, he's had at least 1 interception in every game outside of the game against East Carolina. So he's had to pick against Delaware State. He threw a pick against Kansas. He threw a pick against TCU. He threw a pick against Texas Tech. You're not seeing Baker Mayfield make those kind of mental lapses or mistakes. So I don't think he's a first-round quarterback. Heck, you don't even see Mason Rudolph make those kind of mistakes as much as he has. So I'm selling Will Grier.
Okay.
Now, real quick, I want to go over the AP top 25. I'm just going to go down through the rankings real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it today. We're going to start with number 25, Memphis, 5-1. They weren't ranked before. Number 24, LSU, 5-2. 23, West Virginia, 4-2. 22, Stanford, 5-2. 21, Auburn, 5-2. UCF comes in at 20 at 5-0. Number 19, Michigan are 5-1. Number 18, Michigan State, 5-1. Tied at 16 is NC State and South Florida. South Florida 6-0. NC State 6-1. 15 is Washington State. 14, Virginia Tech. And at 13 at 5-1. Washington number 12. USC comes in at 11, up 2 spots from number 13 last week. Oklahoma State at number 10, 5-1. Oklahoma comes up 3 spots. They are 5-1 at number 9. Number 8, the U at Miami, 5-0, up 3 spots. Clemson, after their devastating loss, goes down 5 positions to number 7. They are 6-1. Ohio State moves up 3 spots at 6-1 at number 6. Washington comes in at number 5, 6-0. Up 2 spots. TCU at number 4 moves up 2 spots. And so far, if college football ended today, your top 4 teams would be the TCU Horned Frogs at 6-0 at number 4, taking on the number 1 seed Alabama Crimson Tide at 7-0, and the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs at 7-0 would take on the number 2 Penn State Nittany Lions at 6-0, as Alabama, Penn State, Georgia, and TCU are numbers 1 through 4. Ryan, what do you think of those top 4?
To be completely honest, I mean, I don't agree or I don't necessarily disagree. It's in between. I'm going to say TCU should be where they're at, though.
I'm going to say that the first of these teams to lose is Penn State, and they will lose to the Buckeyes in the Horseshoe on October 28th. And then we will see Alabama, Georgia, and TCU head into November unbeaten, with maybe one other team, one lost team, making that push for the playoffs, because we're really at only 8 unbeatens left, and 4 are in the playoff. And the other teams, it feels like the other teams that are close to TCU are one-loss teams.
Well, I guess my whole thing with Penn State, though, is as long as their defense plays consistent, like it's known for, I think they can beat Ohio State. As far as Georgia's concerned, I'm actually surprised they even did anything this year. So I really think that this might be one of those stories for the century of, hey, this team managed to be good for that one season. And I think that this might be Georgia's year, if that's the case.
I mean, Wisconsin is number 5. They are the only other unbeaten outside the top 4. I think we'll see Alabama, Georgia, TCU, and Wisconsin all unbeaten heading into the Big Ten championship game. And then we'll either see, because what's going to happen is whoever wins that Penn State-Ohio State game in Columbus, that's who's going to play Wisconsin for the Big Ten championship. And we're going to see Wisconsin run the table, but lose in the Big Ten championship. And then we're probably going to get a one-loss team in the playoff unless the Miami Hurricanes somehow manage to run the table and have a perfect season. Then they would face Alabama, and then the Big Ten champion would face Georgia, most likely. I don't know.
At this moment, I would not be too upset if we saw, and I would not be surprised if we saw a Penn State versus Alabama national championship game, because quite frankly, I would love to see Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley go up against that Alabama defense, because that would be a make or break for both of those men's draft stocks, because I think if Barkley would have a huge game, he would have to be the first running back in talks to be a number 1 overall pick in many, many years. And McSorley, that could put him into the day 2 discussion.
I'll just call it. I'll call a fluke. I'll call a fluke championship game. I call Penn State and Georgia.
How would you guys feel about a Penn State Miami championship, like in the 80s? Don't think it'll
I'd love
happen.
that.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Well,
I would love
you
that.
want
I
the
would love
straight lace, the straight lace guys in the suits against the guys who are out to party. Because let's face it, as tight as some of these people in Florida can be with how high end they are and how everybody looks and all this, that, and the other. These guys are there's some characters. You gotta love living here. You gotta love the atmosphere here, and you gotta love the characters here. And the University of Miami gets all the characters. It doesn't matter who they are. If they are a character, they flock to the University of Miami. And the University of Miami going in there against the suited up, everybody wearing the monkey suits and everything in Penn State, that would be not only a heck of a game, but both states, the state of Florida and the state of Pennsylvania, they'd be rocking for those couple of days.
How do you feel? I think Okorafor is back in the top 10 with the Adams and Williams injuries. I was debating which one to move up to the Bengals at 10 because I just don't trust that I still think Adams and Williams go first round if they declare this year, but I don't think they're in that top 10 conversation anymore. So I was debating who to move up. I went with Okorafor, but I could honestly see Orlando Brown get that spot now, that OT2 spot behind McGlinchey. And I know he was your guy at the beginning of the year, too. You were big on Orlando Brown.
Yeah, Orlando Brown. I'm still big on Orlando Brown. I still think he is one of the players with some of the better upside of any offensive tackle. And I would not be surprised if
Plus Orlando Brown and Joe Mixon. If I mocked Orlando Brown to the Bengals, he'd be reunited with Joe Mixon.
Would, and I think that would be a great position for him to be in. I digress. Well, I am enjoying the conversation. We are out of time for today, and I would like to thank Ryan Romero, the draft professor, for coming on with us today and celebrating just celebrating because we celebrate. How's that sound?
Yes.
And remind everybody, to have fun, take care of each other, hit the button, like, subscribe, share, leave us a comment.
There's an Evolution Network live chat room. You can actually chat with us during the show. This is something I discovered when listening to Ryan in the first few minutes of the show when my page wasn't loaded. So you can live chat with us and ask us questions during the show. I'm willing to take a back seat if we get some people in the chat room so I can engage with them while Joey and Ryan handle things. If that's what it's going to come to, I'm willing to take a back seat if we get some people in the chat room to converse with us during the show.
Yeah, I mean, we always love some interaction. Leave us some comments there. Leave us some comments in the chat room. Leave us some comments wherever. I am sure I will get them at some point somewhere. So for Chris Ransom of Draft Utopia, for the draft professor, Ryan Romero,
self-made, baby.
And for Chris's producer, Lisa Donovan, for the hard time I know she's going through right now with the injury bug and everything going around.
Yeah, I think I said in Tracy's group that when this news broke, Ryan's going to be licking Lisa's tears like Cartman with the Scott Tedderman on South Park.
Oh, and with that moment, well, we say goodnight, folks.